the other article that I wanted to focus on was a piece from The Hill. So The Hill, many times they release articles going after Bernie Sanders and trying to, talk shit about him and, put up like deceiving headlines. Although it seems like The Hill does do a lot of deceiving headlines in general, but they definitely do that with Bernie Sanders. This one is regarding Sanders's appeal among black voters. It says Sanders faces big problem with Biden and black voters. Here it says, former Vice President Joe Biden's entry into the 2020 Democratic presidential race is increasing the pressure on Bernie Sanders to make inroads with black voters. Sanders has been well aware of his need to attract support from African Americans, and he sought since entering the race to fix a problem that impaired him in 2016 when he ran a tougher than expected primary against Hillary Clinton. Clinton was greatly helped in her victory by black votes. She won them by more than 70% over Sanders. The former Secretary of State, New York Senator, and a First Lady was a proven commodity to black voters in 2016 who benefited from the affinity many African Americans held toward her husband, former President Clinton. So that might, like that when it comes to that kind of stuff, as far as like black people liking Bill Clinton and then liking Hillary because of that, that might be something that will exist with Biden being Barack Obama's VP, the first black president, getting a VP, and then that VP later running. I mean, it's possible they're going to link him to Obama. They're going to be like, oh yeah, Biden was chosen by Obama, so he must be a really great guy and he must be really good on black issues. Now, Obama himself wasn't great on black issues, but because he was black, they want to frame that as like, okay, well, because he's black, he must be great on black issues. If you look at Obama's record, that's clearly not the case. What did he do regarding Black Lives Matter? What did he do regarding criminal justice reform? He did release some, I believe it was nonviolent drug offenders in 14 or 15, somewhere near the end of his presidency. He did release nonviolent drug offenders, but as a whole, Barack Obama never really focused on the issue that black voters had. But he was black, and a lot of black voters liked him. So again, they're going to probably do the same they're probably going to like Biden because he was chosen by Obama. So if that is the case, if that truly does end up happening, that's very, very unfortunate, because you have to look at the larger record that Joe Biden has regarding black votes. We're going to have to cover that on a different day. Hopefully do that next week. But yeah, but that's, Joe Biden's record on these kind of issues is not squeaky clean whatsoever, not even close. So continuing on with the article, it says Biden, who on Sunday appeared at a Baptist church in South Carolina, represents a similar threat to Sanders, given the 8 years he served as vice president to former President Obama, the nation's first black president. While Sanders is doing well in polls of white voters and progressives, the African base of the African-American base of the American Party has not rallied to his campaign, at least not yet. A Morning Consult poll released last week showed that 47% of black women said Biden was their top choice to be the Democratic nominee, while 18% said they preferred Sanders. A poll from Quinnipiac University last week found Joe Biden getting the support of 42% of non-white respondents. Sanders trailed Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren, getting just 7% among non-whites. I don't know what the kind of the details of the poll is, as far as specifically what kind of questions they ask, and what kind of so I think mainly when it comes to polling, the question is two things. It's always who do you ask and what kind of questions do you ask in that poll. So in this case, the who do you ask, I'm willing to trust that the poll, it was correct, obviously, in polling black people. So that's black people, and in this case it says non-whites. So obviously Mexicans, Asians, blacks, Native Americans, I guess, Pacific Islanders, who knows. So just a mixture of non-whites, and then the other one was just black people in general. So I'm sorry, that was black women, not black people, black women. So from what I have heard and what I have heard, from what I've known about the feelings that black voters have regarding Bernie Sanders, a lot of the reason that he does not seem to have support is based on how the media portrays his support. And I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm on social media and all that shit. So I can see a lot of people who are black that say they support Bernie Sanders. So he definitely has black supporters. He goes to rallies. He gets, standing ovations and cheers and stuff. I haven't seen specifically the rallies, but from how they're described, again, it depends how you want to. If you want to believe the reporting based on how they are, certain person reports this, or I don't want to be, I don't want to be a homer and be like, okay, well, whatever positive that's said about Bernie Sanders is good, is true, and then whatever is negative about him is not true. So I'm trying to be objective, but when it comes to the reports that I've heard about people that attend Bernie Sanders rallies that have black people in them and have people of color in them, they like him. They cheer for him, they like his policies, and they appreciate what he has to say. What articles are going to put in their, in their breakdowns and stuff, some of it could be true, but it depends what kind of black voters you're talking about. So if you're talking about black voters that, let's say, supported Hillary Clinton, so maybe they support the policies that Hillary Clinton in general pushes for, and the policies in general that Joe Biden pushes for. So, for example, I guarantee you a majority of young black voters would support Bernie Sanders. You know what I'm saying? So young black voters would like him, whereas the older generation, so like 45 and above, so non-millennials, would maybe not like him as much. And maybe, very older, so older black voters, people that were born, during the even before the civil rights movement, during the civil rights movement, before the civil rights movement, all that stuff, they could not support Bernie Sanders. So now my guess is the reason why those people don't support Bernie Sanders is because a lot of them have been Democrats and supporters of like liberal politicians for quite a long time. So they seem to just kind of be more committed to the party. They're not committed to the idea of Bernie Sanders, especially since he's not a Democrat, and they're like, oh my God, he's not a Democrat, so they can't stand that he's not a Democrat. So to them, that's like a slap in the face. Now, whatever. I think I don't think that's a majority of people. I don't know about black voters, but I don't think majority of people out there care about the fact that Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. That's just a narrative that's put out by the media and by a lot of people that I've seen in social media, specifically Democratic loyalists and, kind of propagandists who put out narratives to make Bernie Sanders seem like he's unlikable and all this stuff. So, a lot of the neoliberal centrist groups and stuff, they're going to put stuff out like that about him. But again, I believe that the younger voters who are disenchanted with parties and not into that whole party label shit, they're gonna like Bernie Sanders more, because they're in favor of policies. It's, they're going to be in favor of the policies, whereas the older generation of black voters are going to be more committed to the party. And I think white voters in the party as well are the same way. I think the white Democratic voters are also in favor of the party. So it's much more a thing of just party loyalism. It's not so much, that's my opinion, I could be wrong, but that's just the way I see it. I think it's more of a party loyalism thing that the media tends, at least in these cases, tends to kind of ignore and wants to pretend, no, it's, like Bernie Sanders is just not liked by black people because he has racist views or something, or he doesn't address, the black issues. So black, specific issues when it comes to, civil rights, when it comes to ADOS, so African descendants of slaves, so that whole movement and, reparations and stuff. So let me continue on with the articles here. It says, referring to the poll about Bernie Sanders being set just 7% among non-whites, it says it's possible those numbers to some extent reflect voters' familiarity with Biden, but they are worrisome nonetheless to the Vermont Independents allies. So, yeah, I think that's another factor for sure. That's actually something that I always remember that I forgot to mention in my little commentary that I was just giving, is that a lot of the people that don't support Bernie Sanders is because they don't know who he is. And whether it's black voters, whether it's regular people, women, whatever, men, whatever. So I think a lot of that has to do with just like unfamiliarity. Here's a quote from a Sanders ally. It says, "We have some work to do. I don't see a way for us to win the nomination without support from African Americans. If Biden picks up state after state in the South, it'll make it really difficult for us." At multiple campaign events, Sanders has highlighted his push for economic equality as a way of reaching to African Americans, including his support for Medicare for All, an increase in minimum wage, and free tuition college. So those three issues, Medicare for All, minimum wage, and free tuition college, I think all of those would help black people greatly, and it would help all people greatly. But you have to understand that when it comes to health insurance, issues pertaining to health insurance and kind of the whole idea of having to pay for healthcare bills and stuff, I guarantee you that's a huge problem with the black community. I guarantee you minimum wage and not getting paid a living wage or even a $15 minimum wage, I guarantee you that's a problem with black voters. Free tuition college. Why would black people, let alone anybody, but let's just focus on black people, focus on the African American community. Why would they want to pay more for tuition? Why would they want to pay more for college? Higher tuition rates. They wouldn't. So that benefits those younger. So that's how he appeals more to the younger demographic, because he pushes for issues that the younger people are suffering through. And since the younger people are the people that are going to be alive in within the next half century at least, they're going to vote in favor of Bernie Sanders for these issues. So millennials are going to love him because he's doing things that are benefiting them. But when it comes specifically to millennial blacks and millennial minorities, it's also going to help them. But either the message has to be put out to them better, more clearly for them to truly understand it and grasp it, or it's just or they just don't. Or they just don't like Bernie Sanders, period, no matter what he says, and they just oppose him for other reasons. It says those policies, those three, Medicare for All, minimum wage, and free tuition college, it says those policies could all narrow the racial wealth gap, though none of them are aimed specifically at black Americans. On an issue that does affect black Americans specifically, Sanders shifted his position on reparations by saying he endorsed federal legislation to study the issue. I remember Kamala Harris saying something like that too. Cory Booker too, maybe. So a couple candidates have addressed issues when it comes to reparations. I think that's a little bit of a nuanced matter. I think when it comes to giving reparations to African descendants of slaves is much different than if you were to give reparations to all black people. That's going to be a lot of reparations. But again, I think it's a nuanced issue. I think it needs to be discussed much more in length. I don't think it's just an issue of okay, well, we'll just give out a check to every black person that exists in America. So and then what? It's not. I just don't think it can be fixed that simply. I think it's much better you're going to help a lot more people of color when you're going to be, not forcing them to pay higher health insurance premiums, lesser copays, giving them lesser copays, not making them work some shitty job at $7.75 an hour or whatever the minimum wage is, $8 an hour. Give them a $15 minimum wage. Give them a living wage, and also letting them go to college for free tuition college, letting them at least go to community college for free, let alone regular college. And if every other industrialized country on this earth can do that, so can the United States. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it. So the rest of the article just kind of details. It details how Bernie went to Selma, Alabama, and he joined in a rally there with Al Sharpton. Let's see. It says one Sanders aide said the campaign is focused on Bernie's message of economic, social, racial, and environmental justice, and pointed to outreach to community leaders, including faith-based leaders, racial justice activists, black colleagues, colleges, and universities, and business leaders. Bernie has a long track record of policy to address inequalities, and we plan to build on that with more proposals to further address issues facing the black community and going directly to communities impacted, the aide said. We are taking no state, community, or constituency for granted as part of our effort to build a movement to transform politics in this country and create a government that works for everyone. So Sanders has stumbled as he has sought to appeal to black voters. The most recent example came at the She the People Forum in Houston late last month when he was asked about what he believed the federal government's role was in fighting the rise of white nationalism and white terrorism and how he planned to lead on the issue. Some members of the audience booed after Sanders responded by saying that the nation needed to stand up against President Trump's demagoguery. I don't know why they would boo against that, but okay. After one of the moderators again asked the same question, Sanders began speaking about marching with Reverend Martin Luther King, an answer that provoked more booing. And then it just details how a bunch of women at this what was it? She the People, the forum. So a bunch of these women were angry because he didn't answer questions in the ways that he wanted. So they're taking that rally and specifically trying to use that as like an example of how he did really badly, or he does really badly among women of color. So again, they're cherry picking specific things to show that Bernie Sanders is not liked by this demographic or that demographic. I mean, a lot of it is you're not delving into the facts aside from the polls. The polls are not good for him. I'm not one of these poll truthers. Again, when it comes down to how you ask the questions and the kind of people you sample, the sample size and stuff, I'm not, unless there's issues in those matters when it comes to polling, then I'm gonna have an issue with it. But in general, I like to believe that most polls are going to be truthful. They've done other polls where they've done a higher sample size of people over the age of 45 and said that Joe Biden is leading in the polls by 30 points or something. So that's bullshit. Those kind of polls are bullshit. But when it comes to just a general poll, that's taken out there, I like to usually believe that they're sincere and honest in what they're doing. Hopefully, maybe I'm naive, but I don't like to be one of those poll truthers, because if you can't go based on polls, then what are you going to go based on? You have to decide one way or another. So you can't just like the polls when they're not, when they're against the candidate you prefer, and then, again, in favor of the poll when it's in favor of the candidate you like. So you have to choose one way or another. You can't be a hypocrite on that. So, but all that aside, the point is here that the media wants to frame Bernie Sanders in different ways, whether he's anti-gun control, like I was talking about in the last segment, whether he's initiatives in favor of black people. That's also bullshit. He is in favor of helping people of all races and all colors and all ethnicities and all, communities. But to say that he's not trying to help the black community, I don't think that's true. I just don't really see any evidence of it other than what the media claims, and then just asking a couple people here and there. So why don't you go to like a Bernie rally and talk to a bunch of the black voters that are there? Let's say if he goes to Mississippi or South Carolina or wherever he goes, all these different areas that have the black voters there cheering him on. Ask them, why do you support Bernie Sanders as a black person? Ask them what they think, and then they'll tell you. Instead of just talking to some person that said, that only talking to the person that said they don't support him, go and at least show some semblance of balance or objectivity. Ask the person, another black person, what they think of him, that may be supporting him, and then to counter that person that doesn't support him. At least show some sort of balance there, but they don't do that. I mean, and then they think it's journalism to just report on these things, but you're obviously not doing it in a fair way. It's clearly just to show that Bernie Sanders is, not loved by black people, and that's it. So they just kind of create this narrative, and they just push it until, your fucking eyes bleed, your ears bleed. So, and that's just what the media does. They manufacture that consent.